Okay, next one we're gonna do now is called The Girl in the Wall, The Disturbing Case of Katie Beers. I don't know what this is. I've never heard of this. This was suggested to me by my little brother. I hope this is the one he was talking about. Um, but yeah, this is what we're gonna watch. Okay, let's get into this. The Girl in the Wall, The Disturbing Case of Katie Beers. Let's do this.
Well, my story is...
In 1982, on the 30th of December, right between Christmas and New Year's Eve, a little girl named Katie Beers was born in the town of Mastic Beach, Long
Right,
Island.
okay.
But to people familiar with this case, she's ended up being known as the girl in the wall.
Tell me something.
She threw me on the bed.
I just want my daughter back. Please bring her back.
And then
Like one, okay.
screaming my brains out.
I heard her say
What?
a man was coming after her with a knife, and she said, oh my God, here he comes.
She started kissing
What?
me.
What
What?
his concern is that we find this child, well and safe.
My hand hit a nail.
The last
time I
time I
seen
seen
her,
her, she was walking towards the machine. I started getting scared.
Hello, what's
And
happened so
he,
far? This is new. I've not seen. I literally know nothing about this. We've just started fresh one. We finished Gypsy Rose. I don't know if you were even here to see the end of Gypsy Rose, but we finished that one already. And now we are starting a new one called The Girl in the Wall. This one was suggested to me by Issy.
Cubby hole.
In the what the fuck?
Kidnapped, assaulted, trapped, and chained up, 9-year-old Katie Beers was abandoned by her mom, then used as a slave by her godmother and her sexually deviant husband, before eventually getting kidnapped and trapped in an underground dungeon. For over 3 weeks, the Long Island police dug deep into this menagerie of characters, each more suspicious than the next,
What
in
the-
hopes of getting their hands on the captive 9-year-old.
She's behind the wall. If she's behind the wall, she's not alive.
But to their surprise, she was already at it. She knew how to save herself.
She tried
Whoa.
every strategy she could to make him change his mind and ultimately prevailed. This little
What?
girl at 10 years old changed a kidnapper's mind.
What?
In the small hamlet of Bayshore, Long
the hell?
Island, busy little girl Katie is living a Cinderella-like existence. Since her mother abandoned her, she has been enslaved by her godmother, Linda, and her husband, Sal.
I was their servant,
What the?
whether it was to do the
Oh, this is her.
to clean the bathrooms, to cook dinner. That was my purpose to her growing up.
Oh, this is
I
her.
was
Wow.
pretty
Okay.
much her slave.
But her service to Linda was the least of her concern, since the real monster in that house was none other than her own uncle.
From the time that I was 2 years old, I was sexually abused by my godmother's husband.
When she was 7 years old, Katie had
fuck?
enough, and she tried to tell her godmother the truth about her husband, but her reaction only made it worse.
She
Oh,
told
God.
me that I was a liar and to get out of her face.
Katie wasn't allowed to attend
What?
school and grew up completely isolated. The only friend she had was John Esposito, the typical family friend. But to her, their relationship was special.
I really didn't have any friends my own age. I think in my childhood, the thing that probably made me the happiest was when I got to spend time with John. I would say I loved him. He was
What?
always a confidant, somebody that I would trust.
Amid all of the abuse she already had to go through, Katie's life was about to take a turn for the worse.
2 days before my 10th birthday, I was abducted.
What?
On that day, Katie was left with John, and together they went to Spaceplex, her favorite place in all of Long Island.
At Spaceplex, you can ride motorcycles,
Spaceplex?
shoot baskets,
I've never
or
heard of
even
Spaceplex.
ride a dinosaur.
For my 10th birthday, it was going to be just
She
Big
looks
John
familiar.
and I.
John was nicknamed Big John by the local kids
Big
because he was a
John?
well-known member of the Big Brother Big Sister program.
Whenever we would
What the
go
hell
to
is that?
Spaceplex, I was happy. There was never really a care. There were kids running all over the place.
But her birthday
Okay.
would soon turn sour, as the worst thing that could ever happen to a child came to be.
Oh no. What?
Oh no, here he comes. I gotta go.
What the?
That
What?
voice, calling out Katie's name, is Linda, her godmother. But while she was contacting the police, they were already on the scene with Big John at Spaceplex. They evacuated the site and searched for the rest of the day, but all of these efforts were in vain.
Jeez, what the fuck?
He picked me up and carried me into the closet where I realized he was opening up a door to expose a tunnel.
Whoever
Oh my
got their hands
God.
on her was an extremely apt individual. That tunnel was set up behind the walls of his house and carefully crafted by an expert. Katie was forced to crawl until she reached a trap door.
And then he exposes this hole and he opens up this door into this room. The only word that I have to describe this room was a dungeon, a place that I couldn't escape.
Inside, Katie saw a dirty mattress in a makeshift, soundproof casket surrounded by chains.
This looks like something out of like that movie, The Black Phone, or something.
My man said, "This is your home now."
I heard her say a man was coming after her with a knife, and she said, oh my God, here he comes. So by the time I picked up the phone to talk to her, I got nothing.
This is all of what the godmother Linda had to say
man.
about the ominous call she received on the day of the abduction. This was enough to concern Dominic Verone, the head of the Long Island Police Kidnapping Division.
By the time she gets to the machine, Katie had already hung up. That disturbed me because there's been a lot of times when these abductions are not really abductions. They're made to look like abductions.
And statistically, he was right,
You saw this young girl around?
as over 95% of kidnappings are actually perpetrated by close family members.
No way.
But this wasn't the only unusual thing about that call.
It just struck me as not believable. And I immediately was disturbed by the fact that a 9-year-old child would use the word kidnap. Also, how does a 9-year-old child get away from an abductor and able to use the telephone?
But he had to put his suspicions on the side for now. The priority was Katie, as every minute counted
Respect
in
to
that
him
kind of
for,
case. They needed
like,
to find her.
I think like
and
some people were like,
fast.
oh no, I need to like find her, but he's actually switched on. He's paying attention.
Problems with the call, you did hear a girl in distress. This girl was in danger.
There was absolutely no trace of Katie at Spaceplex, almost as if she was never there. The only clue they had was the recording of Katie's distress call to Linda.
This woman, the person who's talking, I actually done an interview with Anthony Padilla. Why do I feel like
of that telephone call, as well
I've seen her doing like a talk, one of his interviews.
While he was waiting for the FBI, Verone continued his investigation. Naturally, he started by looking into the most likely suspects.
The main players were Marilyn Beers, the natural mother, a dysfunctional, incompetent mother. Linda Larry, the godmother.
My main concern is to let
She
people
looks familiar.
know
Look
how
at that
much I
face.
cared for her.
Why does that look so familiar?
She was used by the godmother to run all kinds of errands. Sal Larry had been charged with sexual abuse on Katie Beers.
Wow.
The girl don't want to live in Mastic Beach with her mother.
But there was also a fourth suspect, outside of the family, the last man to see her before the abduction.
John Esposito, not a relative, but a family friend. He said something dirty happened.
The FBI eventually shared
Something
what they found
dirty
with him.
happened.
It seemed that Katie's call was made from a phone booth in front of Spaceplex, which is weird since they still had found no trace of her inside of the recreation center, and she apparently tried to call Linda 19 times before she decided to leave a message on her answering machine.
19
but all of these
times?
clues were nothing compared to the result of the audio analysis the FBI carried out on the call.
I never forget the call I got from the scientist at the FBI lab who gave me the next bit of breaking news. It wasn't actually Katie who broke free and made that call. It was a recording. It was someone who tape recorded Katie and wanted us to believe, or it to seem, that the call came from that telephone booth next to Spaceplex.
The detective was starting to put the pieces together, and it became evident that the culprit fooled them all. The kidnapping of Katie has been used as a front to something far more sinister.
The phone call was a scripted plot by an individual to make us think that Katie Beers was abducted.
What the fuck?
Back at the dungeon, Katie knew what was going to happen and decided to
This
fight
whole
as hard as she
big
could.
plot.
She noticed the door of the casket was loose and went at it.
Eventually, I had kicked it long enough and hard enough that snapped, and I was able to kind of safely exit.
To her, this was such a breakthrough. She thought she may finally be able to find a way to escape, almost forgetting that the casket was, itself, inside of the dungeon.
Then I had nowhere to go. I remember trying to go on the shelf and see if there was anything there that I could use for some sort of self-defense. And there were a bunch of keys up there. So unknowingly, I grabbed one of those keys and hid it underneath the mattress.
Before she had the chance to try to come up with a way to confront him, she heard him coming. It was too late now, as the footsteps started to get louder and louder.
As soon as he came down, he saw the door open, and he then raped me for the first time.
For the rest of her time in captivity,
What
her
the
abductor would
fuck?
assault her multiple times, every day. But out of respect for Katie, we won't be covering any of her subsequent assaults.
The abductors never.
I was able to
Did
have
you
the
just say that?
TV
Hold on.
24/7.
Never charged for these crimes?
I was able to have the TV on 24/7. It
What?
was on the news that I saw that the police had figured out where the call had come from. They knew that it was pre-recorded.
This information led the police to put together a few theories
Oh
regarding
man,
Katie's
that
whereabouts.
actually just
There were
makes
still
me feel
questions
sick.
he had.
Meanwhile, Katie was able to hear each of her family members' testimonies by watching the news, starting with Marilyn, her biological mother.
Just my daughter back.
Oh, fuck off.
When
Sorry.
I saw
Fuck
Marilyn
off.
on the news, I think I cried a lot because I could see in her eyes that she had missed me and that she wanted me to be found. That gave me some.
That's why she
relief and
abandoned you.
some hope.
Nah, sorry,
Her
no.
mother was convinced that Linda and Sal were behind the kidnapping because they lost her custody after she filed charges against Sal for Katie's sexual abuse.
Our
Whoa.
biggest concern is that we
Okay,
find this
maybe I
child,
judged you too
know,
quick. Sorry.
well and safe.
When Sal, my godmother's husband, was on the news
Fucking
saying that he
scumbag,
wanted me
look
to
at
be
him.
found, I was angry.
If anyone had motive for her to be abducted or murdered, it was he who faced serious criminal charges for sexual abuse.
But Verone wasn't so quick to jump to conclusions, as he also had good reasons to believe that not only Marilyn could be the culprit, but that she may also have tried to frame someone else for her alleged
Her
crime.
mother,
Whoa.
Marilyn Beers, and Little John, Katie's brother, became aware of what was going on with Katie, and there was ample motive that they may set up an abduction just to get her away from a bad situation. They'd be able to walk her out, have Katie make the phone call, tape record it, put it right there, and leave John Esposito holding the bags.
What
After
the
a while,
hell?
the investigation into the family members wore down. Each and every one of them had solid alibis, and no clues were discovered at any of their residences, so the police started to look into the last man on the list, the most unlikely suspect.
The investigators
Esposito.
retraced John Esposito's footsteps, but it was 30 minutes to an hour that we couldn't fully explain and appreciate. We obtained a search warrant and did a full inspection of John Esposito's residence. But there was no evidence of a crime.
Okay.
The background check came in the next day and turned out to be extremely suspicious. Once they
Oh, no.
contacted the Big Brother Big Sisters Association, the program the suspect proudly claimed to be a member of, they learned the dark truth about Big John.
John
Oh,
Esposito
God.
painted himself as a big brother. Detectives discovered that he tried to join that organization, and they did a background investigation on him. We learned that he had been involved in abduction of a 7-year-old child 15 years prior to Katie's disappearance, and they ruled him out as
What?
being a big brother. We
Well,
were able to put
obviously.
pressure on him, following him wherever he went.
This caught the attention of
What?
the media, who also started to scour around his house.
Police searched Esposito's property, the main house and the converted
The-
garage
okay.
out back where he actually lived.
Oh
I knew
god.
that the number one suspect was Esposito. I could see the news was camped out in front of his house.
And if you haven't guessed yet,
Oh,
the kidnapper
God.
was, in fact, John Esposito,
Yeah.
aka Big John. All
Makes
along,
sense.
the man
Yeah.
Katie called her best friend was
Oh,
actually
mm.
planning and scheming until the day he finally kidnapped her.
What
Big
the
John was probably the last person I could have imagined having ever hurt me in such a way.
What
Katie
the
was
hell,
relieved
man?
that the police finally got on the right track, but at this point, Verone doesn't have anything to incriminate Esposito. And even worse, he still had no idea what he did with Katie.
As each day went by, they were becoming more convinced that
Oh, they checked the house, haven't they?
was
But
not
she's in the hole in the
live
wall,
Katie
so
Beers,
that's why
not
they
a body
couldn't.
of Katie Beers.
Must
A few
have
days
not
later,
realized.
Katie woke up in the dungeon.
Esposito had put a chain around my neck. I had realized
What?
that the key that I had grabbed was actually for the padlock. So I was able to at least release myself
He
prior
left
to
the key there.
unattaching it.
I would count how many links were on the end of it and up to the wall as well.
When she would hear Esposito coming, she would quickly chain herself up again in the
Oh my
exact same
God.
way he did. But this tended to happen less and less, since the police, convinced that he was behind her disappearance, almost never left him alone. Instead, they
Good.
kept an
Good.
extremely tight surveillance schedule around him and his house, and Verone
Good.
even went inside to interrogate him.
And I could see it drain out of his face, the concern. I was very disturbed and very concerned that John Esposito had something to do with her abduction.
Out of options,
the hell?
Esposito started making desperate requests to Katie, but the little girl knew better.
Let's make police believe that you're dead. Play dead, I'll take a picture of you. Once police see that, they'll give up on you. And
Wow.
Katie, the bright little girl, wise little girl that she was, knew that that could be her death sentence. And she refused to play dead and let him take a picture of her.
From that point on, I rarely slept, and I also did not eat any of the food that he could have altered because I was fearful that
He's
he
trying to
might
kill
put
you.
something in the food, a sedative, a sleeping pill,
Oh,
something.
right.
So that way he was able to get the photo that
Oh, yeah,
he
that would make
wanted,
more sense,
so the police
yeah.
would stop looking for me.
After this, Katie
What the
decided to
hell?
confront him, to
She's
barrage him
she's
with
really smart for
questions in
her
hopes
being
of
that
making him
young.
realize the insanity behind
She
his
literally
actions.
saved like
How I was going to like go to
saved
school,
herself.
what I was going to do to survive. I wanted to get married and have kids. And he would always have witty remarks right away like, oh, you'll have kids with me, you'll marry me, you'll do this with me. So I would always tell him, no, I don't want to do that.
I was disgusted. I was 10
What the
years
fuck?
old. I was trying to get him to think about the long term of him kidnapping me.
Esposito began to crack
Jeez,
between
man,
the
a
overwhelming
creep.
police presence, Verone constantly tailing him, and Katie's incessant nagging and questioning. He confided to her that he was planning to either end his life or run away. She knew that if she let it happen, he would probably kill her or leave her to die in a dungeon.
I told him that I was sick and I wasn't feeling well. I think between the police department laying on him at his house all the time and my questions and then me saying that I wasn't feeling well finally wore him down.
So all of this pressure is mounting. He finally speaks to his attorney. He says, I have something very important to tell you. And he tells him, I know where Katie is. And the attorney says, what do you mean? He says, she's behind the wall.
And
Wow.
this is where Verone and everybody else involved in the case understood that John Esposito wasn't your usual kidnapper, but an actual mastermind.
Esposito
Clearly he
escorted
had this whole thing in his
police
fucking
and the
walls.
district attorney through all the steps of
What the
unearthing the dungeon, and police watched incredulously as he went through this 30-plus step process of revealing the dungeon that he had built.
There was a bookshelf with wheels on it, and you'd have to pull that out. And then there was vinyl laid on the floor, and you pulled the vinyl back. And then there is a 200-pound concrete block that's there. And you had to know to go into the garage and get this block and tackle, to hook it in the ceiling, to hook it into the 200-pound block, and then raise this block up.
Oh
and
my
then you
God.
drop down about 7 foot into this underground chamber, and then there's a passageway. And as you crawl, you dropped into this underground chamber where Katie was kept.
Apparently, this whole affair had been in preparation for years before he took her.
I had realized that I had actually played in this underground dungeon while it was being built. So he had this vision to build this underground dungeon, and when he had this vision, it was specifically to kidnap me.
When Verone finally broke in, Katie couldn't believe what was happening to her.
How fucked up do you have to be?
And there was a man that I didn't recognize.
So he's literally like, hey, look at this.
Saying,
This is where you're gonna be.
You're safe now.
He let her play where he was going to kidnap and... Whoa.
Verone was similarly surprised, but for a different reason.
We were amazed. You see a 9-year-old look like she just come back from a trip to the movies. She's sitting in the sofa, bubbly, upbeat.
Wow.
And we just knew from that moment on that she was going to be a survivor.
Now in the hands of the police,
Fair
Katie
play.
finally revealed the
She
truth
did
about what
really
happened.
well.
You were supposed to do the safe but never did.
John Esposito had confessed to everything Esposito was convicted of kidnapping in the first degree, and he was sentenced to 15 years to life.
Not only did the detective save her from Esposito, but throughout his investigation, Verone uncovered all of the abuse she had suffered at the hands
he
of the
did
people
really
who
well.
were supposed to take care of her, and decided to place her into foster care.
I entered foster care as soon as I was released from captivity, and that was a salvation for me.
Yeah.
I had a mom, I had a dad, I had brothers and sisters. It was absolutely fantastic.
They also continued the legal procedure against her Uncle Sal and successfully put him behind bars.
Good. Fucking piece of shit, look at this guy.
To this day, Katie will always be grateful towards Verone, as he saved
Verone
her in more
smashed
ways
it,
than
man.
one.
For 17 days, I was his life. He was one of the ones that just did not give up, and I'm grateful of the relationship that I have with him.
I wrote a letter to Katie after the whole thing was over. Dear Catherine, I don't know you very well, but what I do know is enough to show you as a remarkable young girl with a strong determination to live. My only wish is that we could have found you sooner and you didn't have to be down there so long. Not many adults could endure or survive what you went through. Be proud and continue to be strong. I know you will be successful.
Oh man.
In the end, she was a true survivor, refusing to let her past bring her down. Instead, she achieved everything she ever hoped for.
My life is exactly what I had always wanted. 2 parents who love me, and a husband and 2 kids, and a wonderful family. I'm tearing up.
He tried to trap and use her, but she liberated herself. Today, she is a best-selling author and works with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
I think the best part of my story is knowing that you can recover and you can persevere, and your life is
there's a life after all that
you
crap.
make it to be.
She wants every survivor
she was
of any
really
kind
smart
of
for her
abuse to
age.
know that they are more than what happened to them.
She really
was
saved her own life.
determined to not let my childhood traumas come into my adulthood. They've shaped me to who I am, but they don't define me.
Okay. And 94 sellers and just 4 to 12 years and 4 to 12, man. That is not enough. 4 to 12. Sorry. Salary was sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison for molesting kids. He died in prison 2009. Good. Next. Sorry. John Esposito finally admitted to the parole board in 2013. In 2013, he died in prison. Wow, he died this. He must have known he was gonna die. Wow, crazy. That is fucked up. That was a really fucked up one. I'm gonna pause it there. Whoa, that was a messed up one. I don't think I've ever heard of that story. But she literally saved her life. That one, the detective, fair fucking play. You literally caught on very quickly. Katie Beers literally saved her own life. She was very smart in that whole situation, and all the adults, godmother, her mother, the fucking godmother's husband, Esposito, all can fuck themselves, can rot in hell, fuck them all. Jesus Christ, what a fucked up situation. But it's so much respect for her to actually move on from that with her life and actually use her experience to help others. Like, fucking hell, that was a mad one.